The final chapter in the lives of Uday and Uday Hussein unfolded with unrelenting violence on July 22, 2003, in the northern Iraqi city of Mosul. What began as a routine capture operation transformed into a devastating 4-hour siege that would end the reign of terror perpetrated by two of Iraq's most feared figures. These men, who had built their reputations on sadistic cruelty and systematic torture, would meet their end in a hail of tow missiles and machine gun fire that reduced their final refuge to smoking rubble. The Brothers of Terror, to understand the significance of their deaths, one must comprehend the depths of evil these men represented within Saddam's regime. Uday Hussein, the elder son, had transformed Iraq's Olympic Committee into his personal torture chamber, where athletes who failed to meet his expectations faced medieval punishments. The basement of the Olympic Committee headquarters contained devices reminiscent of Spanish Inquisition dungeons: finger vises, chain whips with steel barbs, suffocating steel masks, and a head-to-toe Iron Maiden with interior spikes. Iraqi athletes described living in perpetual terror under Uday's reign. Habib Jaffer, a star midfielder of the Iraqi national soccer team, recounted how players were beaten with electric cables after poor performances. Some athletes were forced to crawl on newly poured asphalt while being beaten, others were thrown off bridges, and many simply disappeared into Uday's private prison system. The Olympic Committee became the only Olympic committee in the world with its own prison and torture chamber. As one British lawmaker observed, Uday Hussein, though maintaining a lower public profile than his sadistic brother, wielded arguably more dangerous power. As deputy head of Iraq's Special Security Organization, he authorized the systematic use of torture against political dissidents. He commanded the elite Republican Guard and controlled the Fedayeen Saddam, a fanatically loyal paramilitary force that served as the regime's enforcers. While Uday inflicted pain for pleasure, Uday orchestrated state-sponsored terror as policy, particularly during the brutal suppression of the 1991 Iraqi uprisings. The hunt intensifies. Following the collapse of Baghdad in April 2003, both brothers had vanished into Iraq's underground network of safe houses and tribal loyalists. The US military created special playing cards featuring Iraq's most wanted fugitives, Uday represented as the ace of clubs and Uday as the ace of hearts, distributing them to coalition forces to aid identification. The combined $30 million bounty on their heads represented the largest reward ever offered for fugitives in modern military history. Task Force 121, a classified joint special operations unit formed specifically to hunt high-value targets, had conducted 12 unsuccessful raids attempting to locate the brothers between April and July 2003. This elite unit combined operators from Delta Force, Navy SEALs, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and CIA Special Activities Division personnel. Their mission was simple but deadly: capture or kill Saddam Hussein and his inner circle. The intelligence network surrounding the manhunt involved hundreds of informants, surveillance operations, and psychological warfare campaigns designed to isolate the fugitives from their support networks. Coalition forces had systematically dismantled the Ba'athist power structure, cutting off financial resources and safe havens that had previously protected regime elements. The betrayal that sealed their fate. The events leading to their deaths began on the evening of July 21, 2003, when desperation and greed intersected in the most deadly way. Nawaf al-Zaidan, a wealthy tribal chief and former Ba'ath Party member, who had been sheltering the Hussein brothers in his luxurious 3-story mansion in northeastern Mosul, made a decision that would haunt Iraq for years to come. Facing mounting financial pressure and growing suspicion from neighbors, al-Zaidan walked into a US military station and betrayed the location of his guests. The informant provided detailed intelligence that proved invaluable to Task Force 121 planners. He described the mansion's layout, the brothers' daily routines, their physical appearances, and the presence of weapons and bodyguards. Al-Zaidan revealed that both men had significantly altered their appearances. Uday had completely shaved his distinctive black hair, while both had grown long, unkempt beards to avoid recognition. Intelligence officers described the informant as nervous, more nervous than anybody else I've seen dealing with it. Yet he possessed exact details that could only come from intimate knowledge of the target location. He passed multiple lie detector tests and provided photographs of the mansion's exterior that matched aerial surveillance imagery. This validation gave US forces the confidence they needed to launch what would become one of the most devastating urban combat operations of the Iraq War. The siege begins at exactly 10 a.m. on July 27, 2003. Elements of the 101st Airborne Division's 2nd Brigade Combat Team, supported by Task Force 121 Special Operations Units, established a cordon around the fortified residence. The operation involved approximately 200 American troops equipped with an overwhelming array of weaponry, including Bradley fighting vehicles, Humvees mounted with TOW anti-tank missile systems, 50 caliber machine guns, Mk-19 automatic grenade launchers, and OH-58D Kiowa attack helicopters armed with 2.75-inch rockets and 50 caliber chain guns. The mansion itself represented a fortress of Middle Eastern wealth. 3 stories of reinforced concrete and steel, surrounded by high walls and strategically positioned to provide excellent fields of fire in all directions. The brothers had spent weeks preparing their defensive positions, barricading stairways, positioning ammunition caches, and creating firing ports that would maximize their defensive capabilities. The initial approach followed standard, a military protocol for high-value target capture, a cordon and knock operation where troops established an impenetrable perimeter while an Arabic-speaking interpreter used a bullhorn to demand surrender. The message was clear: you are surrounded. Lay down your weapons and surrender peacefully. You will not be harmed. The brothers' response came not in words, but in automatic weapons fire that shattered the morning silence. The first blood at 10:10 a.m. Delta Force operators and soldiers from the 101st Airborne attempted their first breach of the building. The assault team moved with practiced precision, using explosives to breach the main entrance, while covering elements provided suppressive fire. However, the house had been transformed into a killing ground, with the second floor heavily fortified and stairs strategically blocked to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. As American forces entered the ground floor, they were immediately met with intense small arms fire from AK-47 assault rifles and machine guns positioned on the upper floors. The brothers and their companions, Qusay's 14-year-old son Mustafa and bodyguard Abdul Samad al-Hadushi, had prepared for this moment, stockpiling weapons and ammunition for what they knew would be their final battle. 3 coalition soldiers were wounded on the stairs as they attempted to advance, while another was struck by sniper fire outside the building. The occupants threw grenades down from the second floor, wounding several Delta Force operators with shrapnel and forcing the assault team to retreat under covering fire. The first assault was repelled within 15 minutes, forcing American commanders to withdraw their forces and reassess their strategy. Blood stained the marble floors of what had once been an elegant Middle Eastern mansion, now transformed into a battlefield where the sons of Iraq's dictator would make their last stand. Escalating violence. What followed was a systematic escalation of firepower that would demonstrate the devastating capabilities of modern military technology. After the initial repulse, Task Force 121 commanders called for heavy weapons support, abandoning any pretense of capturing the brothers alive. The decision was made to treat the mansion as a hardened military target requiring the full spectrum of available firepower. A second attempt was made using MH-6 Littlebird helicopters to insert operators directly onto the roof, but this approach proved impossible due to the building's construction and the intense ground fire emanating from the upper floors. The helicopters were forced to withdraw after taking multiple hits from small arms fire. The Americans then employed 50 caliber heavy machine guns mounted on Humvees and Bradley fighting vehicles, raking the building's exterior with armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate concrete and steel. AIR-36 anti-tank rockets were fired from shoulder-mounted launchers, blasting holes in the mansion's walls and setting portions of the structure ablaze. When conventional weapons failed to silence the defenders, the order was given to employ TOW missiles, wire-guided anti-tank weapons designed to destroy heavily armored Soviet tanks. 10 TOW-2 missiles were systematically fired from Humvee-mounted launchers directly into the house, each one carrying a 13-pound high-explosive warhead capable of penetrating 3 feet of steel armor. The final assault following. The missile barrage that had reduced much of the mansion's upper floors to rubble, Su-58 Kiowa helicopters conducted repeated gun runs, firing 2.75-inch rockets and 50-caliber rounds into any remaining defensive positions. The building, once a symbol of wealth and power in Mosul's elite neighborhood, was systematically demolished by the overwhelming firepower brought to bear against its occupants. The sound of the battle echoed across Mosul, drawing crowds of Iraqi civilians who watched in amazement and terror as American military technology reduced a fortified mansion to smoking ruins. Windows in surrounding buildings were shattered by the concussive blasts, and the acrid smell of high explosives and burning concrete filled the air. Around 1 p.m. local time, approximately 4 hours after the siege began, American forces made their final successful breach. Delta Force operators moved methodically through the devastated structure, their night vision equipment cutting through the smoke and dust that filled the demolished interior. The upper floors had been reduced to twisted metal and concrete debris, with fires still burning in several rooms. The operators ascended carefully through the rubble-strewn stairway to the second floor, where they found Uday Hussein and his bodyguard Abdul Samad al-Hadushi dead from the missile strikes and helicopter gun runs. Both men had been killed instantly when a Tau missile penetrated their defensive position, their bodies mangled beyond easy recognition. The discovery of Mustafa, Qusay's teenage son, added a particularly grim element to the operation. The 14-year-old had hidden under a bed during the final assault, and when discovered by the advancing operators, emerged with an AK-47 assault rifle and opened fire. The American soldiers, faced with hostile fire from what appeared to be a child combatant, had no choice but to return fire, killing the teenager in a brief but deadly exchange. Uday Hussein was found wounded, but still alive and armed in a corner of the demolished second floor. Even with the building collapsing around him and his family dead, Saddam's eldest son maintained his defiant posture, clutching a pistol and preparing for a final confrontation. As American operators approached his position, calling for surrender, Uday raised his weapon in a last act of desperate resistance. A Delta Force operator fired the shots that ended the life of Iraq's most notorious sadist, bringing to a close a reign of terror that had lasted over 2 decades. The aftermath. The bodies were immediately secured and transported via helicopter to Baghdad International Airport for formal identification. Military morticians worked throughout the night to reconstruct the corpses, which had been severely damaged by the missile strikes and sustained gunfire. The process was complicated by the brothers' altered appearances and the extent of their injuries, requiring DNA testing and dental records to provide definitive confirmation. The controversial decision to publish photographs of the brothers' reconstructed bodies generated significant international debate. But U.S. officials insisted it was necessary to prove their deaths to the Iraqi people and prevent the emergence of martyr myths. The images, showing the brothers' faces partially reconstructed by morticians, were broadcast worldwide and distributed throughout Iraq via leaflets and television broadcasts. The price of betrayal, Nawaf al-Zaidan, collected the full $30 million reward, making him one of the wealthiest men in Iraq overnight. However, his decision came with devastating consequences that would haunt him for years. In the months following the operation, his brother Salah al-Zaidan was killed by unidentified gunmen in what appeared to be a targeted assassination. The informant himself was forced into U.S. protective custody and eventually relocated to an undisclosed location outside Iraq. His mansion, completely destroyed in the battle, became a symbol of the price of collaboration in occupied Iraq. The rubble-strewn lot served as a gathering place for anti-American demonstrations and a reminder of the violent consequences that awaited those who betrayed the resistance. The brutal end of Saddam's sons marked a significant psychological victory for coalition forces, but also intensified the cycle of violence that would consume Iraq for years to come. Their deaths eliminated 2 of the most wanted figures in the country, but also created martyrs for the growing insurgency and demonstrated the lethal capabilities that American forces were willing to employ. Against Iraqi targets, the 4-hour siege in Mosul stands as one of the most intense urban combat operations of the early Iraq War period, showcasing the devastating firepower that modern military forces can bring to bear against even the most fortified positions. For Uday and Uday Hussein, men who had lived by violence and terror, inflicting unspeakable suffering on countless victims throughout their lives, their final hours were defined by the same brutality they had so freely dispensed to others. The mansion that had served as their final refuge was reduced to nothing more than a crater filled with twisted metal and concrete debris, a fitting end for two men who had turned Iraq into their personal torture chamber.